Job was innocent of misconduct. That much is clear by his own testimony and God's. Job was the kind of person who kept tabs on his assets, in this case his children, to make sure all was well with them. Job developed a practice of offering sacrifices to God in order to remedy any lack of piety on his part and that of his children. We are not told that Job had made this arrangement with God. We read this as the official storyline about Job's own piety. Based on this, we conclude that Job's attention to his own faithfulness and his commitment to religious practices was flawless. Nowhere in the story do we read that God demanded any protection from divine retribution. However, the story suggests that if God had anything to complain about, no blame could be left on Job's doorstep. Job stayed one step ahead of God in the righteousness department. He believed that his attention to religious practices were his wall of protection from disruption in his life. Until the day the accuser, or the Satan, suggested that Job was a fair-weather follower of God. The Satan accused Job of trusting God only when everything was going his way. And that's where the story's internal drama began. The drama in the challenge to the status quo that Job was determined to keep with his careful religious routine. Job was innocent, and for 41 chapters we are drawn into this beautiful selection of wisdom literature as Job, his friends, his God, and an intruding bystander deliberate on various aspects of Job's claim of innocence. Job is a favorite biblical character for many, even those who've never actually read the story. Job has become a cherished point of reference for our own sense of innocence, especially when a crisis like the current pandemic seems overwhelming and disconnected from our interference. The daily reminders of casualties, the relentless march of infection through our communities, plus the unsavory revelation that we must wear masks because, without knowing it, we have been walking through and interacting with each other's breath expirations that in these days can prove to be somewhat toxic. We're all innocent. We look out onto our vacant doorsteps, certain that by our calculations we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's in our right standing before God and the world. Yet this great oppression has descended upon us from out of nowhere. We're stuck, like Job, suspended over a bottomless canyon that we did not create, and our natural response is to search for cause. The question beneath it all is why. Why should anything alter the calm order of our lives? We're innocent. And in this wisdom teaching, we are given a stage on which to place our own big questions of the day, learning along with Job that our innocence in the affairs of life and our own right standing before God may not be the point at all. Job comes to us in a story that immediately stretches our imagination. All the careful numbering of people, land, and livestock are clues to the fact that this story is not a simple narrative about one life. It's a narrative about life itself, in which the questions and the debates have timeless parallels that touch down in our own 21st century lives. Walter Brueggemann wrote of one student who found a comparison between the Job story and the impact of the Wizard of Oz story on our cultural psyche. Which viewer of that tale has not had a chance to give real-life application to quotes like, "Toto, I've a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore"? In the Job story, The words of the accuser sits exactly opposite Job's claim of righteous innocence, with a challenge that Job's faithfulness is more like a bargain than a sincere regard for God. The Satan claims that Job is in the piety game for what he can gain from it, and not because he cares about God. Wow! Who can answer that but Job himself, or me, or you? What is our real reason for showing up for the rituals of worship and personal devotions and other scheduled gatherings? Is it force of habit, the commitment to piety, the welcoming camaraderie and a captive audience for our latest news, or the knowledge that in gathering to worship with fellow believers, one's worship of God is enriched and strengthened for service and witness? These are 21st century contemplations for us as a congregation in the days where the challenge of multiple losses creates a sense of non-belonging that make the simplicity of Dorothy's observation more real than we ever wanted it to be. No, we're not in Kansas anymore. We're in a season of disorientation in which everything that was certain before seems to be in jeopardy. Professor Walter Brueggemann called the perceived order from which we have come the place of orientation. But life doesn't end there or in disorientation if we follow the pattern of the Job's story. There is a place of new orientation that Brueggemann calls a fresh gift from God. That fresh gift, however, came for Job at the end of a long deliberation in which he was forced to examine and defend his own beliefs. Not unlike Dorothy and her companions through Oz, it does make me wonder whether the immense popularity of that story is not one way we surface our need for self-examination and connection to the deeper questions of life. No easy answers to be found. The good news of the day is the presence of God at the end of the Job story. God remains still a mystery, but vindicated by Job's refusal to bow out of his commitment to God, even through the chaos of disorientation. Job finds God's mystery to be the reality, and recognizes that he and all of creation were born into and live within that mystery, even when it churns up chaos, like a common kitchen blender churns individual ingredients to bring a whole new product into being. Though we may sit now in the ashes of despair with Job, our baptismal confession is also like his. I know that my Redeemer lives. If the Job story has a point, it directs us to the celebrations of Easter and Pentecost. We serve a God who became vulnerable in incarnation and who reclaimed victory out of a crucible of sacrificial vulnerability. In the midst of our chaos and disorientation, we cling to the living Redeemer who will right our course and deliver that fresh gift of a new orientation to worship and service, blessing and encounter with the lives and community to whom we are called. Thanks be to God.